I don't think people talk honestly enough about loneliness. Not the romanticized kind. Not taking time for yourself. Not peaceful solitude. I mean real loneliness. The kind of loneliness that sits in a room with you. The kind that follows you into grocery stores, into apartments, into late nights, into silence. The kind where your phone stays quiet long enough that you start wondering if people think about you at all. Welcome to Out of Freeze. I'm Christopher Allcorn, and today I want to talk about loneliness in adulthood, especially the kind that happens after trauma, grief, depression, caregiving, survival mode, or emotional exhaustion. Because I think many people are carrying this quietly, and I think a lot of us are lonelier than we admit. I think when we're younger, we assume connection will always happen naturally. School creates connection, family creates connection, workplace creates connection, routine creates connection. But adulthood can become surprisingly isolating. People move, people get married, people disappear into responsibilities, caregiving jobs, work, children, burnout, grief. And slowly, your world can become smaller without you even realizing it's happening. Especially if trauma or depression enters the picture. Because survival mode often creates isolation. You stop reaching out. You stop answering. You stop trusting your energy around people. And eventually, loneliness becomes familiar. Not comfortable exactly, but familiar. I know that feeling. The feeling of wanting connection deeply while simultaneously feeling emotionally exhausted by the idea of socializing. That contradiction is difficult to express unless you've lived it. One thing I've noticed about Freeze is that it slowly disconnects people from life. Not dramatically, but quietly. You miss one invitation, then another, then another. You stop posting, stop calling, stop participating, and eventually people stop checking in as much. Not always because they don't care, but because life keeps moving. And honestly, that can hurt deeply, especially when you're already emotionally struggling. I think loneliness becomes especially painful when someone feels unseen while suffering. You start wondering, would anyone notice if I disappeared? Am I becoming invisible? Do people still know who I am? Those thoughts can become very dark very quickly, and I think more people experience that than society realizes. Especially men, especially caregivers, especially people living with grief or trauma. I also think social media has complicated loneliness in strange ways. Because now, we constantly see evidence of other people's lives. Trips, parties, friend groups, relationships, success. And meanwhile, someone else may be sitting alone on a couch feeling emotionally disconnected from the world, watching other people live while struggling to fully re-enter life themselves. And the hardest part is, people often perform connection publicly while privately feeling isolated too. I think many adults secretly feel emotionally alone. They just don't know how to say it out loud. Because loneliness still carries shame. People talk openly about stress, even anxiety sometimes. But loneliness makes people feel exposed. And if you're struggling with loneliness right now, if your world has become very small, if trauma or grief or depression has made you isolate yourself, if you feel disconnected from people, from purpose, or even yourself, I want you to hear me clearly. Loneliness does not mean you are unlovable. And isolation does not mean you have failed at being human. Sometimes survival mode teaches people to withdraw because withdrawing once felt safer than vulnerability. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you someone whose nervous system adapted to survive. And adaptation is not failure. If you stopped reaching out, if you feel forgotten, if connection feels difficult, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not the only person feeling this way. Not even close. I think there's an important difference between solitude and loneliness. Solitude can feel peaceful, restorative, intentional. Loneliness feels like emotional absence, like your inner world has nowhere to go. And after enough loneliness, people can begin emotionally shrinking themselves. You stop sharing, stop opening up, stop believing connection is possible. And honestly, that's part of why I wanted to create this podcast. Because I think people need spaces where honesty feels allowed. Not performance, not pretending, not good vibes only, just honesty. Human beings were never meant to survive everything alone. I think reconnecting socially has to happen slowly sometimes. Tiny movements. Not forcing yourself into huge, overwhelming situations. Maybe texting one friend. Walking somewhere public. Making small conversation. Joining one support group. Sitting near people instead of completely alone. Again, tiny movements. Because connection, like healing, often returns gradually. And honestly, sometimes the first connection people need is simply realizing someone else understands this feeling. That alone can reduce shame enormously. I think adulthood surprises people. Not because life becomes impossible, but because maintaining connection becomes something we actually have to protect intentionally. And when trauma, grief, caregiving, survival mode, or emotional exhaustion enter the picture, connection can become even harder. But harder is not hopeless. Isolation is not permanence. The loneliness is not proof that you are unworthy of love, friendship, or belonging. Sometimes it simply means you're human, living through something very heavy. This has been Out of Freeze. The opposite of freeze is flow. Tiny movements, big change. I'll see you next time, friends. Thanks for listening.